Communication is the quiet power that decides who gets heard, who gets respected, and who gets remembered. The difference between a brilliant idea and an ignored idea often comes down to how it was communicated. You can have talent, knowledge, or ambition, but if you cannot express it clearly, confidently, and intelligently, the world may never notice it. The ability to speak smart is not a gift, it is a skill, and like any valuable skill, it can be learned, strengthened, and mastered. Every interaction in life is built on communication. When you ask for an opportunity, when you lead a team, when you negotiate a salary, when you connect with someone you care about, when you defend your boundaries, and even when you stay silent, you are communicating. The quality of your communication shapes the quality of your relationships, your reputation, your credibility, and eventually your destiny. What makes communication powerful is not just the words you choose, but the psychology behind them. Humans respond to tone, presence, emotion, rhythm, clarity, and intent. They are influenced by how you make them feel, how you make them think, and how you make them see themselves. When you learn to speak smart, you don't just talk well, you influence outcomes. In this audiobook, we will explore the mental frameworks, emotional intelligence, and practical skills needed to communicate with clarity, confidence, and power. You will learn how to listen to influence, how to speak to be understood, how to persuade without force, how to build trust quickly, how to handle conflict calmly, and how to lead conversations with presence and intention. Communication is a lifelong advantage. It compounds, it travels, and it opens doors that talent alone cannot. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Train your mind before you train your mouth. Communication does not start when you open your mouth. It starts much earlier, in your mind. The words you speak are simply the surface layer of a deeper internal process. If the thinking beneath the words is unclear, rushed, reactive, or scattered, the communication that follows will be the same. This is why some people feel misunderstood, even though they said a lot, and why some others say very little yet convey tremendous clarity and power. It begins with how they think. Before words there is perception. Before sentences there is intention. Before expression there is awareness. A strong communicator trains the mind the way a craftsman sharpens his tools. A dull tool makes the work harder, slower, and more painful. A sharp tool makes the same task cleaner, faster, and more effective. The mind works the same way. If you don't take the time to sharpen it, you will struggle in conversations that require precision, presence, or influence. The first mental shift is clarity. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to communicate right now? Most people speak without ever asking that question. They rush to talk, rush to explain, rush to defend, rush to argue. But communication rewards those who pause, those who take a breath, those who organize their thoughts before organizing their words. When you know your intention, the words follow naturally. The second mental shift is emotional regulation. Communication becomes difficult when the mind is hijacked by emotion. Anxiety makes us over-explain. Ego makes us over-defend. Anger makes us over-attack. Fear makes us underspeak. If you cannot control your emotional state, your words will end up serving your emotions instead of serving your purpose. Great communicators don't eliminate emotion, they process it. They step back internally and ask, what needs to be expressed and what needs to be managed? Another key aspect of mental training is perspective taking. Communication is never one-directional, it always involves the listener. Before you speak, consider how your message will land. How will it be heard? How will it be interpreted? How will it make the other person feel? The inexperienced communicator only focuses on what they want to say. The skilled communicator also considers what the other person is ready to hear. That small shift makes communication smoother, less hostile, and far more effective. There is also the matter of self-awareness. Many communication problems do not come from vocabulary, intelligence, or lack of knowledge. They come from blind spots. You might interrupt without noticing. You might speak too softly. You might explain too much. You might avoid eye contact. You might dominate the conversation. You might downplay your ideas. We all have patterns, and unless we examine them, those patterns control us. Training the mind for communication is not about perfection. It is about awareness. It is about slowing down internally so that your external expression becomes more intentional. When the mind is calm, the words are clearer. When the mind is focused, the message is stronger. When the mind is steady, the listener feels it. So before you practice speaking techniques, before you try to persuade others, before you attempt to influence or lead, start with the internal environment. Train your mind to hold clarity. Train it to hold intention. Train it to manage emotion. Train it to observe patterns. Communication is not merely a skill of the mouth. It is a discipline of the mind. Master the mind first, and the words will follow. Chapter 2. Master the art of mental framing. Every conversation begins long before the first word is spoken. It begins with a frame, a mental context that shapes how meaning is received. Framing is the invisible architecture of communication. It determines whether your message lands as helpful or offensive, confident or insecure, respectful or dismissive, persuasive or pushy. People don't just respond to what you say. They respond to the frame through which they interpret it. This is why two people can deliver the same message and get completely different reactions. One gets resistance, the other gets agreement. Same information, different frame. Think of framing as the lens you give the other person to view your message through. When you approach a conversation from a defensive frame, everything becomes a threat. When you approach it from an offensive frame, everything becomes a competition. But when you approach it from a collaborative frame, the conversation becomes a shared problem-solving process. The goal is not to win. The goal is to align. Most communication fails because people don't consider the frame at all. They focus on the content, the facts, the arguments, the points, but ignore the psychological container that holds those points. For example, saying, "We need to talk already," frames the conversation as serious, heavy, or confrontational. The frame triggers anxiety before any actual content is shared. But opening with "Can I share something with you that I think will help both of us?" instantly creates a collaborative frame. Same intention, different outcome. Framing also affects status and authority. When you ask permission for every sentence, soften every opinion, and over-explain every detail, you frame yourself as the lower status participant. When you dominate, interrupt, or bulldoze, you frame yourself as aggressive or insecure, not strong. Powerful communicators don't rely on force. They rely on the frame. They set the tone early. They make the conversation feel safe, constructive, and purposeful. People naturally follow that energy because clarity reduces tension. Another element of framing is expectation setting. People become defensive when they don't know what to expect. Unexpected criticism can feel like an attack. Unexpected requests can feel like demands. Unexpected changes can feel like threats. But when you set expectations up front, resistance drops. Imagine a manager saying, "I need to speak with you about something regarding your performance." That frame triggers fear. But saying, "I want to discuss how we can make your workload smoother and help you shine more on the team," creates a positive performance frame. Both conversations may lead to the same adjustments, but one makes the listener shrink while the other makes them open and curious. Framing also matters in persuasion. Research shows that people rarely respond well to direct pressure. but they respond extremely well to alignment frames. An alignment frame sounds like, here's what you want, here's what I want, here's how both can happen. When people feel aligned, their mind doesn't activate its defensive shields. They don't feel manipulated, cornered, or judged. They feel respected and understood. And respect is a powerful tool of influence. Sometimes the best frame is a future frame. Here's what this will look like going forward. Future frames help people visualize outcomes. Other times you need a benefit frame. Here's how this helps you. Benefit frames bypass resistance by speaking directly to incentives. And occasionally you need a clarity frame. Here's what I'm saying, and here's what I'm not saying. This prevents misunderstandings and assumptions from hijacking the conversation. To master framing, you must also become aware of negative frames. A negative frame is one that makes the listener feel attacked, judged, inferior, or trapped. Statements like, why do you always, you never, you should, you don't understand, you're wrong, trigger emotional defense. Once emotion takes over, logic becomes irrelevant. No amount of reasoning can save a conversation once the frame becomes adversarial. That's why skilled communicators reframe instead of escalate. For example, instead of saying, you're not listening, you can say, I want to make sure we both feel heard. Instead of saying, you're wrong, you can say, let's look at this from another angle. Reframes shift the conversation from attack to collaboration, from blamed curiosity, from conflict, clarity. It feels subtle, but it changes everything. Framing also influences trust. When you use a frame of transparency, here's why I'm bringing this up, or here's what I'm hoping to achieve, you reduce uncertainty. Uncertainty is the enemy of trust. When people don't know your motives, they guess them, and people rarely guess generously. A transparent frame fills in the blanks, so the mind doesn't have to. There is one more advanced layer, self-framing. Self-framing is how you present yourself in conversations, not by boasting or signaling status, but by demonstrating competence, calmness, and intention. When you communicate from a frame of grounded confidence, people mirror it. When you communicate from a frame of scarcity, insecurity, or fear, people mirror that too. Humans are emotional tuning forks. They align with the loudest signal in the room. Mastering framing takes awareness, not talent. It takes intention, not force. And it begins before you speak, not after. When you choose the frame wisely, communication stops being a battle of words and becomes a meeting of minds. The frame decides the game, and the one who sets it rarely loses. Chapter 3. Understand human biases and assumption gaps. Communication would be simple if people always interpreted information exactly as it was intended. But humans don't hear what was said. They hear what they think was said. They filter information through their experiences, insecurities, desires, fears, memories, and assumptions. This means that every message has two versions, the one you sent and the one the listener received. And those two versions are rarely identical. The gap between them is where misunderstanding, conflict, and confusion are born. To communicate powerfully, you have to understand that people don't respond to reality. They respond to their perception of reality. This is where human biases enter the picture. Biases are mental shortcuts the brain uses to process complex information quickly. They aren't flaws, they're survival mechanisms, but they affect communication deeply. For example, confirmation bias makes people selectively hear what supports their beliefs and ignore what doesn't. Negativity bias makes negative information feel louder and more threatening than positive information. Ego protection bias makes people reinterpret comments to protect their self-image, even if no harm was intended. You don't need to become a psychologist to understand biases. You just need to remember that the mind is constantly editing incoming information. When someone hears feedback, their mind might translate it as judgment. When someone hears a suggestion, their mind might translate it as criticism. When someone hears a request, their mind might translate it as pressure. The wise communicator anticipates these distortions instead of being surprised by them. Assumptions add another layer. Humans rarely ask for clarification. They guess meaning to fill gaps quickly. They assume tone, assume intent, assume context, and assume subtext, especially when the relationship has an emotional history. If someone already believes you criticize them, even neutral comments may sound like critiques. If someone already trusts you, even sharp feedback may sound constructive. The listener's prior narrative modifies your current message. This is why misunderstandings escalate so fast. Conversations don't collapse because of facts, they collapse because of interpretation. And interpretation is shaped by bias. For example, imagine you tell a coworker, "We should finish this sooner so we're not rushed later." You might intend helpful coordination. They might hear control. They might hear criticism. They might hear urgency. They might hear blame. They might hear pressure. 5 interpretations, same sentence. The meaning is not in the words, it's in the mind of the listener. To navigate assumption gaps, you must adopt a mindset of clarity over cleverness. Communicators get into trouble when they assume that what is obvious to them is obvious to everyone else. But people do not share your inner context. They do not share your thought process. They do not share your emotional state. They do not share your private logic. If you don't make these things explicit, people will create their own version of them. Another factor that shapes interpretation is ego. Humans have an instinctive need to feel competent, respected, valued, and right. When communication threatens one of those needs, even unintentionally, the brain shifts into defensive mode. You can see it in body language, crossed arms, tense shoulders, short answers, raised voice, avoidance, sarcasm. Defensiveness is not always a sign of disagreement. Often it's a sign that ego is trying to protect itself. Skilled communicators don't attack ego. They create conditions where ego does not feel at risk. Perspective taking is the tool that bridges assumption gaps. It doesn't mean agreeing with the other person. It means understanding how the world looks from their side of the table. When you see their perspective, you can adjust your delivery without abandoning your message. For example, instead of saying, "You're doing it wrong," you can say, "Want to try a different approach that might make this easier." The content is similar, but the framing removes the threat to competence. The ego stays intact, so the mind stays open. Bias awareness also helps you avoid escalating small problems into big ones. For instance, negativity bias makes people pay more attention to what went wrong than what went right. If you provide only corrections, the listener may feel attacked, even if your intention was improvement. A simple adjustment like acknowledging what worked before discussing improvements can neutralize negativity bias and reduce resistance. People learn faster when they don't feel like they're losing status. There's a powerful principle here. Communication quality increases when interpretation effort decreases. The more the listener has to guess, infer, and decode, the more vulnerable the message becomes to bias, ego, and assumption. The less they have to guess, the cleaner the communication becomes. You can also use clarifying phrases to reduce assumption gaps. "Here's what I mean. Here's why I'm mentioning this. I'm sharing this to help, not criticize. I want to make sure we're on the same page." These small phrases create psychological safety. They manage interpretation proactively, instead of reactively. Great communicators don't wait for misunderstandings. they prevent them. Ultimately, mastering communication requires acknowledging a simple truth. Humans are meaning-making machines. They don't just hear words, they build stories around those words. Some stories empower the conversation, some stories distort it. Your job is to guide the story the listener builds, and that begins by understanding the biases, assumptions, and internal narratives they bring to the table. When you honor the psychology of perception, your communication becomes not just clearer, but smarter, kinder, and far more effective. Chapter 4. Communicate with emotional precision. Every message you send carries two layers: the information you deliver and the emotion beneath it. People don't just absorb your words, they absorb how those words make them feel. Emotion is the silent partner of communication. It shapes tone, interpretation, memory, and reaction. But most people communicate emotionally by accident. Powerful communicators communicate emotionally by intention. They don't suppress emotion, and they don't unleash it recklessly. They direct it with precision. Emotional precision begins with emotional awareness. You cannot control what you cannot recognize. Many people enter conversations without realizing what emotional state they're carrying. They speak from irritation without noticing the irritation. They speak from anxiety without noticing the anxiety. They speak from insecurity without labeling it. When the emotion is invisible, it becomes uncontrollable. And when it is uncontrollable, it becomes the hidden author of your message. Emotional awareness is simply the ability to pause internally and ask, what am I feeling right now, and how do I want that feeling to shape my communication? Labeling the emotion changes the conversation. Neuroscience shows that when you name an emotion, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling defensive, I'm feeling pressured, the emotional intensity decreases because the brain shifts from reaction to observation. Observation creates distance, and distance gives you choice. You no longer speak from the emotion. You speak about the emotion. That difference is subtle, but transformative. Emotional precision also requires recognizing the emotion of the listener. Humans rarely articulate how they truly feel during communication. They express emotions indirectly, through tone, posture, speed, hesitation, avoidance or defensiveness. A person saying, I'm fine with a closed posture and clipped words is not fine. A person nodding quickly may not be agreeing. They may be trying to escape discomfort. A person smiling through tension is not relaxed. They're hiding anxiety or frustration. Emotional cues are part of the communication, even when words deny them. To communicate with precision, you must respond to emotion, not just to language. If someone is defensive, pushing facts harder won't help. Their brain isn't in logic mode, it's in protect mode. The skilled communicator softens the emotional environment before continuing the logical argument. They might say, I'm not trying to criticize you, I'm trying to make this easier for both of us. That small acknowledgement relaxes the protective instinct and reopens the listening channel. Another aspect of emotional precision is regulating your own emotional delivery. Emotion influences tone, and tone influences meaning. A sentence delivered with warmth invites cooperation. The same sentence delivered with tension triggers resistance. For example, we need to talk can feel threatening if spoken abruptly but supportive if spoken calmly. I disagree can feel like an attack or an invitation, depending on tone. Let's fix this can feel empowering or demanding. Emotion gives your words their texture. When you control your emotional texture, you control how your message lands. However, emotional precision does not mean being emotionless. It means being intentional. A message delivered with compassion can heal. A message delivered with confidence can inspire. A message delivered with calm authority can de-escalate conflict. A message delivered with enthusiasm can energize. Emotion is a powerful tool when expressed deliberately. The key is to choose the emotion that matches your goal, rather than letting whatever emotion you feel spill out unfiltered. Timing also plays a role. Emotions fluctuate throughout a conversation. If you address a sensitive issue the moment the other person is reactive, their emotional state becomes the filter for everything you say. In that moment, even good intentions can sound threatening. Emotional precision means waiting for the right emotional moment, when there is space, calmness, and psychological readiness. Sometimes the best emotional strategy is patience. Let the emotion settle before the message enters. Empathy is another core element. Empathy doesn't require agreeing with the other person. It requires understanding their emotional landscape. When you acknowledge emotion, I see why that upset you. I understand why you felt pressured. I know this is difficult to talk about. You create a safe space. People relax when they feel seen, and when they relax, they listen better. Empathy is not weakness. It is influence. It converts emotional tension into emotional cooperation. Being emotionally precise also protects your own boundaries. If you communicate without emotional precision, you may overshare, overcommit, or over-justify. When you feel guilty, you over-explain. When you feel insecure, you soften your message too much. When you feel angry, you push your message too hard. Emotional precision keeps you grounded. What do I want to express? What do I not want this emotion to distort? It allows you to hold confidence without aggression, firmness without harshness, vulnerability without instability. Ultimately, emotional precision transforms communication from chaotic to intentional. It reduces misunderstandings, builds trust, and deepens connection. When people feel emotionally safe in your presence, they open up. They become honest. They become cooperative. They become engaged. And you in turn become someone who is easy to listen to, easy to trust, and easy to follow. Great communication is not about perfect words. It is about aligned emotion. When your emotion, your intention, and your message work together, people don't just hear you, they feel you. And that is when communication becomes powerful enough to influence, heal, persuade, and inspire. Chapter 5. Speak clearly, not cleverly. One of the biggest mistakes people make in communication is trying to sound impressive instead of trying to be understood. They use complex language, long sentences, and abstract explanations because they believe sounding smart will make them credible. But in reality, communication rewards clarity, not cleverness. People are drawn to what they can immediately grasp, not what they have to decode. When you make your listener work too hard to understand you, they stop trying. Their attention shifts, their patience shrinks, and their interest fades. Clarity keeps their mind open, complexity pushes it away. Clarity begins with simplicity, but simplicity does not mean shallow. The most intelligent communicators are the ones who can break down complex ideas into clean, digestible explanations without losing meaning. That requires more understanding, not less. Anyone can make something sound complicated. It takes real mastery to make it sound simple. Think of the great teachers you've had in your life. They didn't overwhelm you with jargon. They gave you language that made sense, language that stuck, language that guided you. To speak clearly, you must first think clearly. The mind that is tangled will produce tangled speech. Before you talk, ask yourself, what is the point I'm trying to make? That question alone can save entire conversations from drowning in explanation. A single clear point is better than 5 scattered ones. When you refine your point, the listener can follow you. When you scatter your point, the listener gets lost in the fog. Another key to clarity is structure. Communication becomes messy when people jump from idea to idea without transitions. They start in the middle, jump to the beginning, skip to the end, and then loop back to something they forgot. The listener feels like they're riding a train without tracks. Structure gives the listener orientation. A simple pattern such as what happened, what it means, what we should do, is often enough to organize even complex conversations. Clear speech also requires eliminating unnecessary verbal clutter. Filler language, like, you know, basically, kind of, sort of, makes speech softer, weaker, and less assertive. It signals uncertainty even when you are not uncertain. Pauses are more powerful than fillers. A pause communicates confidence. It gives the listener space to process, and it gives you time to select better words. Many people fear direct language because they confuse directness with harshness. But directness is not aggression, it is respect. It respects the listener's time, intelligence, and attention. Saying, "I need help with this project," is clearer than saying, "I was thinking that maybe if you're not too busy, perhaps you could possibly take a look at it." Notice how the second version hides the message under layers of hesitation. The listener has to dig to find the point. In communication, the more digging required, the more likely the meaning gets lost or distorted. Tone also affects clarity. If your tone is too timid, the listener may miss your intention. If it is too rushed, the listener may miss your details. If it is too monotone, the listener may miss your emphasis. Speaking clearly is not only about what you say, but how you land it. Pace matters, emphasis matters, volume matters. These are not theatrical tricks. They are tools that guide attention. A well-timed slowdown signals importance. A slight lift in tone signals a key idea. A brief pause signals completion. To speak clearly, you must also avoid ambiguity. Ambiguity breeds confusion and frustration. When you give vague instructions like, "We'll handle that later," or "Do it the way you think is best," the listener may interpret them differently than you intend. In a personal context, ambiguity leads to assumptions. In a professional context, it leads to mistakes. Replace vague statements with concrete ones. "Let's schedule a meeting for tomorrow at 10, or use the same format as last week. Precision prevents misunderstanding. Clarity also involves choosing the right level of detail. Too much detail overwhelms. Too little detail leaves gaps. Skilled communicators adjust the level based on the listener. A technical expert may require more detail. A busy executive may require less. A friend discussing an emotional issue may require depth instead of speed. Clarity is not one size fits all. It is tailored to context. Another important piece is recognizing that clarity is not only about delivering a message, but confirming it was received. After explaining something, a simple confirmation such as, "Does that make sense?" or "Should I clarify any part of that?" keeps the communication loop intact. It prevents silent confusion. Many problems arise because people pretend to understand when they don't. Clarification saves time, energy, and relationships. Ultimately, speaking clearly is an act of service. It removes friction from communication. It preserves attention. It honors the listener. Cleverness serves the ego. Clarity serves the purpose. And when your communication consistently serves the purpose, people listen to you more closely, trust you more easily, and follow you more willingly. Speaking clearly is not about simplifying your intelligence, it's about amplifying your impact. Chapter 6. Stop talking first. Influence through listening. Most people think the way to become a powerful communicator is to say more, talk more, explain more, argue more. But communication doesn't begin with talking. It begins with listening. Influence begins with listening. Understanding begins with listening. Connection, respect, persuasion, and trust all begin with listening. When you resist the urge to talk first, you gain access to the information that truly matters: how the other person thinks, what they value, what they fear, what they expect, and what they need to hear. Without that information, your words are guesses. With it, your words become precise. Listening is not a passive behavior. It is not the absence of talking. It is an active skill. It requires focus, curiosity, and patience. When you listen well, you are not waiting for your turn to speak. You are not mentally rehearsing your reply. You are not preparing a counter-argument. You are simply absorbing. You are studying the emotional tone, the choice of words, the pacing, the hesitation, the emphasis, the omissions. Human communication is full of signals, but you cannot see those signals if you are too busy transmitting instead of receiving. Listening also gives you leverage. When someone feels heard, they stop resisting. Their defensiveness lowers, their ego relaxes, their mind opens. And that opening is where influence lives. Most people have never experienced being deeply listened to. When they do, they feel understood. And people tend to cooperate with those who understand them. They argue with those who don't. That alone makes listening a form of power. There is a psychological reason listening works. Humans are storytellers. They explain themselves through narratives. They reveal their fears, motives, beliefs, blind spots, and desires through the stories they tell. When you allow them to tell those stories uninterrupted, they give you the blueprint for how to communicate with them. If they focus on control, speak to control. If they focus on safety, speak to safety. If they focus on fairness, speak to fairness. When you know what their mind is organized around, you know how to align your message with their internal language. But to listen well, you have to remove certain habits. One of these habits is interrupting. Interrupting breaks emotional rhythm. It signals, my thoughts matter more than yours, even if that isn't the intention. Interruption is not just rude, it's strategically unwise. Another habit to remove is premature advice giving. People don't always speak to be fixed. Sometimes they speak to be understood first. When you rush to solve, they feel dismissed. They feel rushed. They feel unheard. Advice should follow understanding, not precede it. You also have to resist the urge to dominate silence. Many people feel uncomfortable with silence and rush to fill it. But silence is information. Silence means the other person is thinking, processing, or searching for the right words. When you jump in too quickly, you interrupt their internal process. Powerful communicators allow silence because silence reveals. Silence draws out deeper answers, deeper feelings, and deeper clarity. If you fill silence, you get the surface version. If you allow silence, you get the truth. Listening requires curiosity. Curiosity is the antidote to assumptions. Instead of assuming you know what the person means, ask. Ask about intention. Ask about meaning. Ask about what they really want. Questions create depth, and depth creates understanding. The mistake many communicators make is confusing familiarity with accuracy. Just because you've heard someone speak before doesn't mean you fully understand them. Curiosity keeps you from jumping to conclusions that can damage trust. Listening also enhances persuasion. You cannot persuade someone if you don't understand what they value. You cannot persuade someone if you don't understand what they fear. You cannot persuade someone if you don't understand what they are committed to protecting. Listening reveals the blueprint of persuasion. Once you know how their brain organizes reality, you can speak in a language they respond to. To persuade someone who values freedom, You must show how your idea increases their freedom. To persuade someone who values certainty, show how your idea protects stability. Without listening, persuasion becomes a game of force. With listening, persuasion becomes a game of alignment. Listening also strengthens relationships. Humans bond through being understood. We feel closest to those who listen most deeply. We distance ourselves from those who constantly talk. If you think about the people you trust most, chances are they are the ones who make you feel heard. They don't just talk at you, they draw you out. They give you space. They let your inner world come to the surface. Communication is not just exchanging words, it is exchanging worlds. Listening is the way those worlds meet. Listening also protects you from unnecessary conflict. Conflict often arises not from disagreement, but from misinterpretation. People fight over things they never needed to fight about, because they never listened long enough to realize they were actually aligned, or at least partially aligned. When you listen first, you discover the shared territory. Once you locate shared territory, solutions become easier, calmer, and faster. Ultimately, listening is the highest form of respect you can offer in communication. When you listen, you are saying, your thoughts matter, your feelings matter, your experience matters. And in return, people willingly give you something priceless, their openness. When they open, you gain influence, and when you gain influence, you can communicate with far greater impact. Influence begins, not with your mouth, but with your ears. Chapter 7. Ask questions that open people up. One of the most powerful tools in communication is not a statement, it is a question. Questions have the ability to unlock information, reveal motivations, expose fears, clarify needs, and deepen connection. When you ask the right questions, you don't just gather data, you open doors inside people. You give them permission to think more deeply, speak more openly, and share more honestly. And the more they share, the easier it is to understand how to speak to them, how to influence them, and how to build trust with them. Asking questions changes the dynamics of communication. Most people enter conversations with the intention to express, to explain, or to convince. But conversations become richer when the intention shifts toward discovery. Discovery is the heartbeat of good communication. It is the part that says, before I tell you what I think, I want to understand what you think. This shift alone reduces conflict, lowers defensiveness, and increases cooperation. People open up when they feel invited into the conversation, instead of talked over or talked at. Not all questions are equal. Some questions shut people down, others open them up. Closed questions, the kind that can be answered with yes or no, are useful for logistics, but not for understanding. If your goal is to learn more about a person's perspective, experience, or reasoning, you need open-ended questions. Questions like what makes you feel that way, or how did you come to that conclusion, or what matters most to you in this situation. These questions don't just ask for information, they ask for meaning, and meaning reveals the inner world. Questions are also powerful because they shift attention. When you ask someone a question, you shine a light on a part of their mind that may not have been illuminated before. Questions like what would success look like for you, or what are you afraid will happen if we do this, force the other person to explore their own psychology. Many people have never paused long enough to articulate those thoughts before. Your question becomes a mirror. It helps them see themselves more clearly, and people trust those who help them see themselves without judgment. There is also strategic value in questions. Persuasion becomes easier when you ask questions that guide someone to discover the logic on their own. If you tell someone what to think, their ego may resist. If you guide them to the conclusion through questions, they feel ownership over the answer. Ownership dissolves resistance because people rarely fight their own ideas. A well-timed question can move a conversation forward more effectively than a long explanation or a passionate argument. Listening is essential here. Asking questions without listening deeply becomes interrogation. Asking questions with genuine curiosity becomes connection. When you ask a question, give the other person time to think. Don't rush to fill the silence. Don't jump to conclusions. Let their thoughts unfold. Some answers require time to find. Silence is not emptiness. It is incubation. The best insights often emerge after the first few seconds of hesitation. You should also pay attention to sequencing. The first question in a conversation should not be the deepest one. People need emotional warm-up. If you start with questions that are too personal, too fast, you trigger defensiveness. But if you begin with lighter questions, then gradually move toward deeper ones, you create safety. Safety precedes disclosure. Disclosure precedes trust, and trust precedes influence. In leadership contexts, questions are especially powerful. Leaders who only give instructions produce compliance. Leaders who ask questions produce engagement. When you ask, "How do you think we should approach this?" or "What obstacles are you seeing?" or "What support do you need?" you create ownership. People follow leaders more willingly when they feel involved, not controlled. In conflict situations, questions can disarm hostility. Asking, "Help me understand what feels unfair to you," or "What part of this concerns you most?" switches the conversation from confrontation to exploration. Exploration lowers emotional tension. When emotions calm, rationality returns, and solutions become possible. In relationships, questions build intimacy, not surface questions like, "How was your day?" but deeper questions like, "What did you learn about yourself today?" or "What's been on your mind lately that you haven't said out loud?" People carry unspoken worlds inside them. Questions are invitations to share those worlds. When you show someone that their inner world interests you, connection grows stronger. We feel closest to the people who make us feel seen, and questions are how we see. Asking good questions also protects you from assumptions. The human brain loves to fill gaps with guesses. We assume intentions, motivations, and meanings that may be completely wrong. Questions replace assumption with clarity. Clarity prevents unnecessary conflict, disappointment, or misinterpretation. A simple question like, "What did you mean when you said that?" can save hours of silent resentment. Ultimately, asking questions is a sign of humility. It acknowledges that you don't know everything. It acknowledges that the other person's perspective matters, and it positions you as someone who seeks understanding instead of dominance. That alone makes you pleasant to communicate with. It makes you a person others want to talk to, not because you speak so well, but because you listen so well. Powerful communicators treat questions like tools. They use them to uncover meaning, to guide thinking, to build trust, to reduce conflict, and to connect more deeply. Talking may give you attention, but questions give you insight, and insight is where real influence begins. Chapter 8. Master body language, tone, and presence. Long before people analyze the words you say, they react to how you show up. Humans are constantly scanning for nonverbal cues, signs of confidence, signs of insecurity, signs of tension, signs of interest, signs of threat. You may be speaking calmly, but if your shoulders are tense and your voice is tight, the listener feels that tension. You may be delivering a logical argument, but if your face shows doubt, the listener senses uncertainty. Words tell part of the story. Tone, posture, pace, expression, and presence tell the rest. Communication is never just verbal. It is energetic, physical, and emotional. Body language is your unspoken communication. It reveals your internal state, often more accurately than your voice. Straight posture signals confidence. Leaning slightly forward signals engagement. Crossing your arms signals defensiveness or discomfort. Avoiding eye contact signals insecurity or deception, even if you have nothing to hide. When your words say one thing and your body says another, people believe the body. This is why someone can say, "I'm fine," while their body communicates the opposite. The body rarely lies. Tone is another powerful layer. Tone carries emotion. It carries attitude. It carries intention. Words can be identical while tone changes everything. Can we talk? Can sound supportive, neutral, anxious, or confrontational, depending on tone. I need your help can sound respectful or demanding. I disagree can sound curious or combative. Tone shapes how the message is received, because tone reveals how you feel about what you're saying. When tone and message align, communication feels authentic. When they clash, communication feels suspicious. The pace of your speech also influences perception. People who rush through their sentences often come across as nervous, uncertain, or overwhelmed. People who speak too slowly may sound hesitant or disengaged. The sweet spot is a pace that reflects clarity and confidence, not rushed, not sluggish, simply intentional. An experienced communicator varies pace strategically, slower for emphasis, faster to convey energy, pauses to give meaning room to breathe. Pauses are one of the most underused tools in communication. Many people fear silence. They rush to fill every second with words, thinking silence signals weakness. But silence signals composure. Silence gives the listener time to digest what you said. Silence creates anticipation. Silence shows confidence. A pause after an important point allows that point to land. A pause before a point creates curiosity. Skilled communicators are not afraid of silence. They use silence as punctuation. Facial expression also plays a role. Humans have evolved to read faces for emotional cues. A slight smile can soften criticism. A calm expression can de-escalate conflict. A raised eyebrow can invite deeper explanation. A blank expression can create anxiety or uncertainty. You do not need to perform your emotions theatrically, but you should be aware that your face speaks its own language. If your expression contradicts your intention, the listener will feel confused or unsettled. Presence is the highest level of nonverbal communication. Presence is not posture. Presence is not tone. Presence is the energy you bring into the room. It's how grounded you appear, how attentive you are, how much space you occupy, mentally and emotionally. Presence is built through stillness, not through noise. People with presence do not fidget constantly, rush through speech, or scatter their attention. They make the other person feel like they are the only one in the room. That kind of presence commands respect without demanding it. Presence also requires control over your internal state. If your mind is chaotic, your presence is chaotic. If your emotions are unsettled, your presence is unsettled. When you learn to regulate your inner world, your outer world communicates stability. Stability makes people trust you. Stability makes people listen. Stability makes people follow. Leadership communication is built on presence, long before it is built on persuasion. Alignment is key. When body language, tone, and words point in the same direction, communication feels cohesive. When they point in different directions, communication feels confusing. Consider apologizing while rolling your eyes. The words say sorry, but the body says, "I don't mean it." Or consider saying, "I'm confident in this plan," with hesitant tone and closed posture. The words say confidence, the delivery says doubt. Alignment creates clarity. Misalignment creates distrust. Nonverbal communication also affects influence. People are more likely to take direction from someone who radiates calm authority. They are more likely to open up to someone who radiates warmth. they are more likely to cooperate with someone who radiates respect. The goal is not to fake these qualities, but to embody them. You embody them by managing your attention, regulating your nervous system, and entering conversations deliberately, rather than reactively. An overlooked part of nonverbal communication is listening posture. When you are listening, your body should show that you are receiving, not preparing to respond. Nodding occasionally, making eye contact, leaning slightly forward, and keeping your arms uncrossed signals openness. The listener feels valued, and when people feel valued, they contribute more honestly. When your listening posture is closed or distracted, checking your phone, scanning the room, fidgeting, people shut down. They speak less, they reveal less, connection collapses. You don't need to memorize a catalog of gestures to communicate well. The goal is not performance, the goal is awareness. When you become aware of what your body is saying, you gain control over how your message is experienced. When you become aware of tone, you gain control over how your words are felt. When you become aware of presence, you gain control over how people respond to you. Communication is not just about speaking smarter, it is about showing up smarter. And the way you show up can speak louder than any word you say. Chapter 9. Tell stories that make people feel and act. Facts inform the mind, but stories move the heart. And when the heart moves, the body follows. Stories are one of the oldest communication tools humans possess. Long before there were books, speeches, or presentations, there were stories told around fires. Stories taught values, preserved knowledge, united tribes, and built cultures. The reason stories work is simple. The human brain is not wired to remember isolated data. It is wired to remember narrative. It is wired to remember emotion. It is wired to remember meaning. When you learn to communicate through story, you gain access to a part of the brain that logic alone cannot reach. Storytelling is not about entertainment. Entertainment is optional. Meaning is essential. A story carries context. It carries emotion. It carries purpose. And it carries a lesson. When people tell you they understand what you're saying but don't change their behavior, it's often because they understood intellectually, not emotionally. Stories convert intellectual understanding into emotional resonance, and emotional resonance creates action. A good story does three things. First, it creates connection. The listener sees themselves in the narrative. Second, it creates clarity. It simplifies a complex concept into something visible and concrete. Third, it creates commitment. It inspires a desire to do something, think differently, or change course. Stories turn abstract ideas into lived experiences. Instead of saying consistency matters, you tell a story about a small daily action that produced a large result. Instead of saying communication is powerful, you tell a story about a moment when one sentence changed a relationship or a career. The story becomes the proof. Stories don't need to be grand. They can be small, personal, observational, or even borrowed. What matters is the lesson carried within. People often believe that storytelling must be dramatic, filled with conflict, triumph, or tragedy. But some of the most powerful stories are simple moments where insight was born. A brief conversation with a stranger, a childhood memory, a mistake that taught a lesson, a realization that arrived unexpectedly. If the insight is real, the story is valuable. To tell stories that influence, you must understand structure. Most stories have a natural rhythm: situation, struggle, resolution, and lesson. The situation sets the context. Where are we? Who is involved? What's happening? The struggle introduces tension. What challenge arose? What problem needed solving? What obstacle appeared? The resolution explains how the situation changed, what action was taken, what was learned, what outcome emerged. And the lesson delivers meaning, why the story matters, and what it teaches. Without the lesson, the story is a memory. With the lesson, the story becomes wisdom. Emotion is the engine of storytelling. The listener must feel something: curiosity, hope, discomfort, inspiration, or recognition. Emotion is what locks the story into the mind. When people recall stories, they don't remember every detail, but they remember how it made them feel. They remember the punchline, the turning point, the realization, the tension, the message. Emotion turns communication into memory, and memory turns communication into influence. Stories also humanize communication. When you share a story, you reveal vulnerability, not necessarily weakness, but realness. Realness makes communication accessible. It makes it safe. It makes it safe. It makes listeners relax. We trust people who feel human, not perfect. We trust people who share lessons, not just instructions. A leader who only gives orders creates distance. A leader who gives context through story creates understanding. When people understand the why, the what becomes easier to follow. Storytelling is also a tool for persuasion. Humans resist direct pressure, but respond naturally to narrative, because narrative allows them to draw their own conclusions. Instead of saying, "You should take this course of action," you tell a story of someone who took that course and benefited. Instead of saying, "This idea works," you tell a story of how it worked. The listener connects the dots themselves. When they reach the conclusion internally, there is no resistance, because they arrived there voluntarily. Stories allow persuasion without force and instruction, without dominance. Listening also improves storytelling. To tell relevant stories, you must understand what the listener cares about. A story that resonates with an engineer may not resonate with an artist. A story that moves a parent may not move a teenager. Relevance increases impact. If you pay attention to what people value, you can choose stories that speak directly to those values. That is how communication becomes tailored, instead of generic. Once you master storytelling, you gain an advantage beyond business or leadership. You gain the ability to shape meaning. Humans are constantly trying to make sense of life. Stories are how they do it. When you give someone a story, you give them a model for understanding themselves and the world. A mentor who teaches through stories doesn't just give instructions, they give frameworks. And frameworks outlast instructions. The beauty of storytelling is that it doesn't require a special voice, dramatic flair, or literary talent. It requires noticing the small moments, noticing the lessons, noticing the human experience. When you tell stories that reveal truth, people lean in, they listen, they remember, and perhaps most importantly, they change. Communication that does not change anything is merely noise. Communication that uses story becomes signal, it becomes meaningful, it becomes transformative. Chapter 10. Persuade without forcing or manipulating. Persuasion is often misunderstood. Many people imagine it as a form of pushing, convincing, debating, or winning. But real persuasion rarely involves force. It rarely involves pressure, and it never requires manipulation. Real persuasion is the art of alignment, aligning interests, aligning incentives, aligning interpretations, and aligning desires. When persuasion works, it feels natural. It feels cooperative. The other person doesn't feel defeated. They feel understood. They don't feel controlled. They feel empowered to choose. To persuade without force, you must begin with intent. Intent is the moral foundation of persuasion. If your intent is to win at any cost, you will manipulate. If your intent is to overpower, you will pressure. But if your intent is mutual benefit, persuasion becomes a service instead of a weapon. It becomes a way of helping someone see what aligns with their own values and goals. Influence built on self-interest collapses quickly. Influence built on mutual interest lasts. The first step in ethical persuasion is understanding what the other person values. People don't make decisions based on what you value, They make decisions based on what they value. If you try to persuade a safety-oriented person with arguments about risk-taking, you will fail. If you try to persuade a freedom-oriented person with arguments about structure and security, you will fail. Persuasion works when the message fits the listener's internal incentive system that requires listening before speaking, observing before explaining, and asking before advising. The second step is creating alignment. Alignment means showing how your idea helps them move towards something they already want. Alignment reduces resistance because it feels like support, not conflict. A common persuasive mistake is trying to change what people want. Changing desires is extraordinarily difficult. Changing paths is easier. Instead of arguing for new desires, help them pursue their existing desires more effectively. If they value efficiency, show how your idea saves time. If they value status, show how it improves reputation. If they value connection, show how it improves relationships. When you speak a person's values back to them, persuasion becomes effortless. Another critical part of persuasion is reducing threat. The human brain is designed to protect its beliefs, identity, and sense of competence. When persuasion threatens any of those, resistance spikes. This is why arguments escalate. Each side defends identity, not just opinions. Skilled communicators avoid identity threats. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," they say, "There might be another way to look at this." Instead of saying, "You should," they say, "Here's what I've noticed works well." Small changes in phrasing can prevent psychological confrontation. Once the ego is calm, the mind becomes receptive. Choice is another element. Humans resist losing control. If a suggestion feels like a command, the listener instinctively pushes back, even if the suggestion is beneficial. To avoid triggering control-based resistance, offer options instead of demands. "You could try this, or a combination of both." Keeps autonomy intact. When people feel they have agency, they don't fight the message, they explore it. And exploration increases adoption. Stories also play a role in persuasion. Humans are less defensive when they are watching someone else's story unfold. When you tell a story about a person who benefited from a certain choice, the listener imagines themselves in that position without feeling attacked. The story creates emotional distance and psychological safety. There is no direct pressure, no confrontation, no threat. The listener draws conclusions voluntarily. Persuasion becomes a discovery instead of a battle. Joint problem solving is another strategy. When persuasion is framed as collaboration, how can we make this better for both of us? The conversation shifts from opposition to cooperation. Cooperation is fertile ground for influence. It lowers defensiveness, fosters creativity, and encourages ownership. What do you think would make this work for you? Is a powerful question. It transforms persuasion from convincing to designing, and people support what they help design. Timing matters too. You cannot persuade someone who is emotionally charged. You cannot persuade someone who is scared. You cannot persuade someone who feels attacked. Emotional readiness is a prerequisite for rational influence. A calm conversation at the right time outperforms a passionate argument at the wrong time. When emotions stabilize, perspective widens and the mind opens. Finally, ethical persuasion ends with voluntary commitment. You don't have to push for commitment. When a message is aligned, respectful, and emotionally safe, the listener will often commit naturally. If they don't, forcing them is counterproductive. Influence is never about winning the moment. It's about winning the relationship. A relationship preserved is a channel of future influence. A relationship damaged is a door closed forever. Persuasion without force is not weak. It is smart. It respects human psychology instead of fighting it. It works with ego instead of against it. It uses alignment instead of pressure. And because of that, it builds influence that lasts. Communication that pressures may win arguments, but communication that aligns wins people, and winning people matters more. Chapter 11. Build trust and rapport. Quickly and authentically. Trust is the gateway through which all meaningful communication must pass. Without trust, information is doubted, intentions are questioned, and motives are interpreted through suspicion. With trust, communication becomes smoother, easier, and more honest. People reveal more, listen more, and cooperate more. Trust is not a luxury in communication, it is the foundation, and like all foundations, it must be built deliberately. Rapport is the first stage of trust. Rapport is that subtle feeling of ease you experience when you talk to someone and everything flows. It's not necessarily about agreement, it's about comfort. When rapport is high, people drop their guard, they stop performing and start telling the truth. When rapport is low, conversations stay on the surface. People protect themselves. They share only what is safe and nothing more. If your goal is to influence or lead, surface-level communication is not enough. You need access to real information, real thoughts, and real emotions. Rapport gives you that access. The first principle of building rapport is presence. Presence means giving your full attention to the person in front of you. Not partial attention, not distracted attention, and not the kind of attention where you're listening with your ears, but thinking with your mind about what you'll say next. Presence communicates presence communicates care, and presence communicates that the other person matters. Humans can sense when they are being half listened to. They can also sense when they are being deeply received. The difference is enormous. The second principle is mirroring. Mirroring is the natural human instinct to synchronize with people we like or feel safe with. We mirror tone, pace, posture, and energy. This is not manipulation, it's biology. Skilled communicators consciously mirror in a subtle, respectful way. If someone speaks slowly, you slow down. If someone speaks enthusiastically, you add warmth. If someone is reserved, you reduce intensity. Mirroring makes people feel understood without a single word of agreement. It tells their nervous system, we are similar, you are safe. Another part of building rapport is validation. Validation does not mean agreeing with someone's point of view. It means acknowledging their feelings or perspective as real. When you say, that makes sense, or I can see why that frustrated you, you validate their inner experience. Validation disarms defensiveness. It lowers resistance. People often tense up, not because they disagree with you, but because they feel unseen. Once they feel seen, disagreement becomes lighter and more rational instead of emotional and protective. Trust also increases when your communication matches your behavior. Words create expectations. Behavior either confirms them or breaks them. Consistency is the currency of trust. If you promise something and deliver, you deposit trust. If you promise and fail, you withdraw trust. Too many withdrawals, and the account closes. In communication, inconsistency is especially damaging because it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is threatening to the brain. The more predictable you are, in tone, in reaction, in follow-through, the easier it is for people to connect with you. Authenticity plays an equally important role. People can detect inauthenticity quickly, even if they cannot explain how. Their intuition signals that something is off. Authenticity doesn't mean oversharing. It doesn't mean revealing every private thought. It means aligning your external expression with your internal reality. When your words, motives, and energy match, communication feels clean. When they don't, communication feels like a performance. Performances can entertain, but they do not build trust. Listening also builds trust. When someone truly listens, they communicate that the other person's perspective matters. And when someone feels that their perspective matters, they relax emotionally. This emotional relaxation creates an environment where truth emerges more easily. Truth is the raw material of meaningful communication. Without it, you cannot lead, persuade, or resolve anything effectively. Humility strengthens rapport as well. Humility in communication means acknowledging that you don't know everything. It means asking questions instead of assuming. It means admitting when you make mistakes or misinterpret something. Many people believe that admitting uncertainty weakens credibility. In reality, it does the opposite. It signals confidence without ego, and confidence without ego is deeply trustworthy. Another underrated factor in trust is confidentiality. When people share something vulnerable, personal, or sensitive with you, they are testing your trustworthiness. If you betray that trust, even subtly, you do serious damage, not only to that relationship, but to your own reputation as a communicator. Trust is not just built through what you say, but through what you protect. The speed at which you build trust also depends on how well you manage judgment. Judgment shuts doors, curiosity opens them. When people sense that you are judging them, even silently, they withhold. They edit themselves, they give you the safe version instead of the real version. But when they sense that you are curious rather than judgmental, they bring their authentic self forward. Authenticity creates connection, and connection creates influence. Finally, trust requires time, but not always as much time as people think. When you combine presence, validation, curiosity, humility, and consistency, trust can grow surprisingly quickly. And once it grows, communication becomes easier, faster, and more productive. People don't just hear your words, they allow your words to matter. When trust is high, even difficult conversations become manageable. When trust is low, even simple conversations become difficult. In communication, trust is not the goal, it is the starting point. Trust is the soil in which influence grows. Without it, nothing takes root. With it, almost anything is possible. Chapter 12. Communicate through boundaries and standards. Communication is not only about what you share, it is also about what you do not allow. Boundaries are often spoken of in emotional or therapeutic contexts, but few people recognize that boundaries are one of the most powerful communication tools available. Boundaries shape how others treat you, how far conversations go, how respectful interactions remain, and how much mental space you preserve. Without boundaries, communication becomes reactive, chaotic, or draining. With boundaries, communication becomes clear, respectful, and sustainable. Boundaries are simply standards for how you expect to be spoken to, treated, and engaged with. They are not threats. They are not ultimatums. They are not punishments. They are communication guidelines. People who lack boundaries often find themselves feeling misunderstood, used, or resentful. Not because others are always malicious, but because others were never told where the limits were. When limits are not communicated, they will be crossed. Communication requires not only expression but protection. To communicate boundaries well, you must first understand what they protect. Boundaries protect your time, your attention, your emotional bandwidth, your dignity, and your values. Time boundaries prevent people from consuming your day. Emotional boundaries prevent people from unloading without consent. Respect boundaries prevent people from speaking to you in ways that degrade or diminish. Value boundaries prevent you from compromising what matters most. Without boundaries, communication becomes a negotiation between your needs and someone else's urgency. Expressing boundaries does not require aggression. It requires clarity. Instead of saying, "Stop bothering me," you might say, "I'm available to talk about this after lunch." Instead of saying, Don't dump your problems on me, you might say. I need a heads up before heavy conversations. Boundaries do not need to attack, they need to inform. When boundaries are expressed calmly, they are harder to argue with and easier to respect. There is also a distinction between boundaries and walls. Boundaries keep communication healthy. Walls block communication entirely. A wall says, I won't engage. A boundary says, I'll engage, but not at the cost of my well-being. People who build walls isolate themselves and lose influence. People who build boundaries maintain access and trust while protecting their energy. Standards operate in a similar way. A standard is not about what you won't accept, it's about what you expect. Standards elevate communication, while boundaries protect it. Standards sound like, I appreciate direct communication, or I value punctuality, or I prefer planning over last-minute changes. When you communicate standards early, you prevent conflict later. Many conflicts are simply the collision of unspoken expectations. Speaking standards up front reduces misalignment. Boundaries also influence tone. When you do not have boundaries around tone, others may speak to you sharply, dismissively, or disrespectfully. When you say, I'm willing to discuss anything, but not while we're yelling, you shift the container of the conversation. Now the content may be heated, but the process stays respectful. This part is crucial. Boundaries are often more about process than content. You may disagree with what someone says, but the process for saying it must not violate dignity. Learning to say no is one of the strongest boundary tools in communication. No is not rejection, it is clarity. Without no, your yes becomes meaningless. When you say yes to every request, every favor, every conversation, every crisis, you silently communicate that your time is available, your attention is cheap, and your priorities are negotiable. Boundaries restore scarcity. Scarcity increases respect. Another skill within boundary communication is the use of consequence. Not punishment, consequence. A consequence is what happens naturally if a boundary is continually ignored. For example, if we can't discuss this calmly, I'll need to step away until we can. Or, if we can't stick to deadlines, we'll have to adjust the timeline. You are not threatening, you are describing reality. Consequence gives boundaries teeth without aggression. Boundaries also improve relationships. Contrary to popular belief, boundaries do not push people away, they protect connection from resentment. Resentment is what truly damages relationships. Resentment grows silently when you overextend, overgive, or over-tolerate. Eventually the relationship collapses under the weight of unspoken frustration. Boundaries prevent that collapse by keeping emotional accounts balanced. In leadership, boundaries are essential. A leader without boundaries becomes overwhelmed, indecisive, or disrespected. A leader with boundaries becomes a stabilizing force. Employees or collaborators know what is acceptable and what is not. Meetings start on time. Expectations are clear. Emotional chaos does not run the room. Leadership communication without boundaries is a slow descent into burnout. Leadership communication with boundaries creates structure and respect. In personal life, boundaries help relationships remain voluntary instead of obligatory. When someone shares time or energy with you because they want to, not because they feel pressured to, intimacy becomes healthier and more authentic. Boundaries protect both sides from taking each other for granted. There is one more important aspect. Boundaries communicate self-respect. You don't have to announce self-respect. You demonstrate it through what you allow and what you don't. People may not always know how to treat you, but they will learn by observing what you tolerate. When you hold boundaries calmly and consistently, you train people how to communicate with you. Ultimately, communication is not just about expressing ideas. It is about shaping conditions for sustained connection. Boundaries and standards are the conditions. They create the container that keeps communication safe, respectful, and emotionally clean. Without them, influence becomes stressful. With them, influence becomes sustainable. Chapter 13. Handle conflict with calm power. Conflict is inevitable. It appears in families, friendships, workplaces, partnerships, negotiations, and even within our own internal dialogue. The presence of conflict is not a sign that communication has failed. It is a sign that communication is needed. What separates weak communicators from strong ones is not the absence of conflict, but how they respond to it. Conflict handled emotionally becomes chaos. Conflict handled reactively becomes escalation. But conflict handled calmly becomes resolution. Calmness is not passive. Calmness is power under control. When conflict arises, the first instinct for many people is to defend. Defense often leads to offense, and offense often leads to a cycle where both parties are no longer trying to understand, they're simply trying to win. Winning becomes more important than clarity. Winning becomes more important than connection. And the strange truth is that in communication, the moment the goal becomes to win, you have already lost. You have lost alignment, lost empathy, and lost access to the other person's mind. Conflict handled through ego becomes a battle. Conflict handled through curiosity becomes a conversation. The foundation of calm conflict resolution is emotional regulation. Emotions are natural and valid, but they are terrible negotiators. Anger narrows perception, fear distorts risk, pride rejects compromise, and insecurity searches for threat. When these emotional distortions take over, words become weapons. Accusations fly, tone sharpens, voices rise, and the real problem becomes buried under layers of emotional shrapnel. Emotional regulation is not suppression. Suppression pretends nothing is wrong. Regulation acknowledges emotion, and then chooses expression instead of reaction. One of the most powerful tools in conflict is slowing the pace. Conflict escalates quickly when tempo accelerates. People talk faster, interrupt faster, breathe faster, and assume faster. Speed fuels tension. Slowing down creates space. Space for listening, space for reflection, space for choosing words instead of firing them. A slow tone and steady pace communicate confidence. They signal that you are not threatened and not eager to attack. That alone can disarm a conflict-minded person. Listening is another tool in conflict. Most arguments are not fueled by disagreement, but by misinterpretation. Two people can actually agree on the solution, but still fight for an hour because they never listened long enough to discover the agreement. Listening is not surrender. It is strategy. It allows you to identify whether the conflict is about content, what happened, process, how it happened, identity, what it means about me, or emotion, how I feel about it. Different conflicts require different responses. Without listening, you end up treating every conflict like a logic problem. But many conflicts are emotional problems dressed as logical ones. Language choices also matter. Blame language triggers defense. Defense language triggers counterattack. Phrases like, "you always" or "you never," or "this is your fault," place the other person in a corner. Cornered minds fight. Cornered egos fight even harder. Shifting from blame to perspective softens the battlefield. Here's how I saw it, or here's how that impacted me, or here's what I was expecting. You are expressing without accusing, you are sharing without attacking, and you are keeping the conversation in the arena of reality rather than exaggeration. Another important layer of conflict resolution is seeking shared ground before seeking solutions. Humans cooperate more easily when they feel aligned, even a tiny point of agreement. We both want this to work, or we both care about the outcome. or we both frustrated with the situation, reduces emotional distance. Agreement lowers tension, and once tension drops, solutions emerge naturally. Many conflicts collapse because both parties focus on their differences first. Great communicators flip the sequence, align first, negotiate second. Curiosity is a powerful conflict tool as well. Asking questions like, what part of this feels most unfair to you? Or what are you worried will happen if we do it differently? Changes the conversation from confrontation to exploration. Exploration activates problem-solving regions of the brain. Confrontation activates defensive regions. The moment curiosity enters, hostility loses oxygen. Protection of dignity is another principle. Conflict becomes toxic when it threatens identity. If someone feels stupid, inferior, disrespected, or humiliated, they will fight not for the argument, but for their dignity. Even if you are right on the facts, if you are wrong on dignity, the conflict will not resolve. Preserving dignity sounds like, I respect your perspective, or it makes sense why you'd feel that way, or you bring up a fair point. You are not surrendering your position, you are preserving the other person's humanity while defending your own. That is power. Sometimes the smartest move in conflict is stepping back temporarily, not fleeing, not abandoning, pausing. Heated minds do not produce good decisions. Pausing allows the emotional temperature to drop, so the logical mind can re-enter. Saying, let's continue this when we've both had time to think, is not weakness, it is leadership. It signals that the goal is resolution, not victory. Finally, conflict resolution requires knowing when to end the fight, not because you lost, but because nothing more can be gained. Some conflicts are unsolvable because they are value conflicts, not detail conflicts. Some conflicts are ongoing because one side wants harmony and the other wants control. In those cases, calm power may mean setting boundaries rather than seeking resolution. Handling conflict calmly is not about never raising your voice or never disagreeing. It is about refusing to let emotion, ego, or fear hijack the conversation. Calmness gives you clarity. Clarity gives you strategy. Strategy gives you influence, and influence gives you the ability to resolve conflict without destroying connection. That is real power, and it rarely comes from force. Chapter 14. Speak to move people into action. Communication becomes truly powerful when it does more than inform, when it causes movement. Ideas by themselves are inert. Advice by itself is passive. Insights without action remain trapped in the mind. What separates inspirational communication from influential communication is the ability to translate words into motion, to move someone from understanding to doing, to move someone from agreement to commitment, to move someone from intention to behavior. When your communication inspires action, you stop being a speaker and become a catalyst. Moving people to action begins with clarity of direction. Many messages fail to produce action not because the listener disagrees, but because they don't know what to do next. The communicator assumed the next step was obvious. It rarely is. People need to know what the action is, why it matters, and how to begin. Vague motivation creates excitement but no progress. Clear direction creates momentum. If someone finishes listening to you and says, I understand, you inform them. If they finish and say, I know what to do, you influence them. Another factor in action-oriented communication is emotional activation. Humans don't act because they know, they act because they feel. Emotion is the ignition switch of behavior. Logic organizes, but emotion energizes. If your message is purely logical, the listener nods politely and returns to life unchanged. If your message reaches the emotional layer, their desires, their fears, their hopes, their sense of identity, then action becomes possible. But emotional activation must be intentional, not manipulative. The goal is not to overwhelm with feeling, but to connect meaning to purpose. When someone sees the personal meaning behind an action, resistance fades. Urgency also plays a role. Without urgency, action is delayed. Humans default to later. Later becomes tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Eventually becomes never. To move someone into action, you must create a reason for now. Urgency does not require fear. It can come from opportunity. It can come from timing. It can come from alignment. It can come from momentum. When you communicate why action matters today instead of someday, you reduce procrastination and increase engagement. Another key element of action-oriented communication is relevance. People take action more easily when they see how the action fits into their life. Relevance answers the unspoken listener question. Why does this matter to me? You can have the best strategy in the world, but if the listener cannot connect it to their goals, values, or problems, they will not act. Many communicators make the mistake of explaining what should be done without explaining why it is worth doing. Action without context feels like labor. Action with relevance feels like progress. Credibility also influences action. People follow instructions from those they trust, those they respect, and those they perceive as competent. If credibility is lacking, action stalls. Credibility is not built by boasting. It is built through consistency, clarity, and demonstration. When you communicate principles you live by, your words gain weight. When you communicate lessons you have embodied, your message becomes believable. Action is easier to inspire when belief is strong. To move people into action, you must also reduce friction. Friction is the invisible resistance that kills momentum, uncertainty, complexity, fear of failure, lack of resources, or unclear steps. If a task feels overwhelming, people hesitate. If a task feels simple, they move. Break actions into achievable starting points. The first step should feel small enough to begin, but meaningful enough to matter. A tiny action is better than no action. Once people begin, momentum takes over. Action creates clarity. Clarity reinforces confidence. Confidence fuels more action. Language plays a significant role as well. Action-oriented communication uses verbs, not just nouns. It uses direction, not just description. It uses commitment, not just ideas. Notice the difference between "it's important to exercise" and "start walking for 10 minutes tonight." The first informs, the second instructs. Or consider, we should communicate better as a team versus let's begin, by having weekly 10-minute check-ins to sync expectations. The first is a concept. The second is a step. Movement requires steps. Another powerful tool is visualization. When people can visualize themselves taking action and succeeding, the brain begins to rehearse the behavior. Visualization reduces psychological distance. It makes action feel familiar before it happens. Phrases like "imagine how it will feel when" or "picture yourself after doing" activate this mechanism. The brain responds to imagined experience similarly to real experience, which reduces the emotional cost of starting. Celebrating progress is also essential. When action is acknowledged, it reinforces itself. Humans are wired to repeat what is rewarded. Reward does not require praise or applause. Sometimes acknowledgement is enough. "We're on the right track," or "that step was important," or "look how far we've come," fuels internal motivation. Without acknowledgement, action can feel invisible, and invisible effort eventually dies. The final ingredient is ownership. People act more strongly when the action feels like their idea, not someone else's instruction. Ownership is created through involvement. Ask for input. Ask for preferences. Ask for choices. When someone participates in shaping the plan becomes theirs. And people fight harder for what they own. If you want commitment, create ownership. Without ownership, you get compliance at best, and compliance rarely lasts. In the end, communication that moves people to action is communication that respects psychology. It understands that humans are emotional, contextual, meaning-driven, and momentum-based. Words alone are not enough. Clarity, relevance, urgency, emotional activation, reduced friction, and ownership bridge the gap between knowing and doing. When your communication consistently moves people into action, you stop being merely articulate. You become impactful. You become someone whose words matter, not because they sound good, but because they make things happen. Chapter 15. Control the room with silence and timing. Communication is not only about what you say, it is also about what you don't say. Silence and timing are two of the most advanced tools in communication, and yet most people fear them. They fear silence because it feels like emptiness. They fear pauses because it feels like weakness. They fear waiting because it feels like losing control. But silence and timing are not signs of weakness. They are signs of mastery. When you learn to use them intentionally, you stop chasing attention and start commanding it. Silence creates space. Space for thoughts to land. Space for emotions to settle. Space for meaning to surface. Most communicators rush their delivery, stacking words on top of words, hoping that quantity will create impact. But impact is not created by piling information. Impact is created by allowing information to breathe. If you say something important and immediately continue talking, the listener doesn't have time to absorb it. They hear it, but they don't feel it. A well-placed pause turns an idea into a moment. Silence also shifts power. In conversation, the one who rushes to fill silence often holds the weaker position, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack comfort with space. Powerful communicators are comfortable with space. They do not panic when the room becomes quiet. They let the silence draw attention toward them rather than away from them. In negotiation, silence can prompt the other side to reveal more than they intended. In teaching, silence can encourage students to think instead of expecting answers immediately. In leadership, silence can make directions sound more deliberate. Silence is not absence, it is strategy. Timing is equally critical. Timing governs when to speak, when to ask, when to pause, and when to stop. Two people can say the same sentence and produce completely different results simply because one said it at the wrong time. Timing determines emotional readiness. A good idea delivered at the wrong moment is a wasted idea. A correction delivered when the listener is defensive becomes an argument. A suggestion delivered when the listener is grateful becomes collaboration. Timing respects psychology. It respects that emotion and attention fluctuate. Great communicators read timing by reading the room. Reading the room means observing energy, posture, tone, and focus. When energy is tense, timing calls for patience. When energy is open, timing calls for clarity. When energy is scattered, timing calls for anchoring. When energy is fatigued, timing calls for brevity. Communication is not performed in a vacuum. It is performed in an emotional environment. Timing adapts to the environment rather than ignoring it. Silence also serves another function. It invites contribution. When you pause, the listener has room to respond, to think, to connect dots. People often avoid silence because they fear awkwardness. But awkwardness is not a real threat. Awkwardness is just unfamiliarity. In fact, some of the best conversations begin right after a pause that most people would have rushed to fill. Silence is a signal to the listener that their input matters and that the conversation is not a monologue but an exchange. Timing also enhances persuasion. When persuading, the order in which you present ideas matters. If you begin with conclusions before building context, the listener may resist. If you build context first, resistance softens. If you ask questions early rather than late, the listener participates instead of observes. If you allow time for reflection instead of pressuring for agreement, commitment becomes voluntary. Influence is not just what you say, but when you say it. Another important form of timing is knowing when to stop. Many communicators lose the impact of their point because they keep talking past the moment of maximum force. They repeat themselves, justify themselves, or over-explain out of insecurity. The result is dilution. When you stop at the moment the point lands, you preserve power. You leave the listener thinking instead of retreating. Great comedians know this. Great negotiators know this. Great teachers know this. They stop at the right moment. Not when they run out of words, but when the idea has taken root. Silence can also reveal truth. When someone is uncomfortable with silence, they often keep talking, sometimes revealing what they didn't intend. This is why interviewers, negotiators, and therapists all rely on silence. After a question, many people rush to answer before they fully think. Silence forces them to think, and from thinking often comes honesty. Silence extracts information that pressure cannot. But silence does not work without composure. If your silence is filled with anxiety, the listener senses tension. If your silence is filled with confidence, the listener senses gravity. Silence reflects the internal state of the communicator. The more grounded you are inside, the more powerful silence becomes outside. Presence fuels silence. Calmness gives it shape. Intention gives it direction. There is also cultural nuance in silence. In some cultures, silence is seen as respect. In others, it is seen as disagreement. In some, it is seen as consideration. In others, it is seen as weakness. A skilled communicator adapts without abandoning their center. Adaptation is not about changing who you are. It is about speaking in the language the audience understands. Timing and silence are part of that language. Ultimately, controlling the room with silence and timing is about maturity. It is about recognizing that communication is not a race, not a competition, and not a performance. It is a process of exchange. When you slow the process, space opens. When space opens, attention sharpens. When attention sharpens, influence increases. Silence is not empty. Silence is deliberate. Silence is commanding. Silence is persuasive. And timing transforms communication from noise into power. Conclusion. Communication is more than speaking well. It is more than choosing the right vocabulary or structuring the right sentences. Communication is how you reveal yourself to the world, how you think, how you influence, how you build trust, how you handle conflict, how you lead, and how you create meaning. Words are the surface, but psychology is the foundation, and when you master both, you gain an advantage that extends into every dimension of life. Throughout this audiobook, we explored the deeper layers of powerful communication, the parts most people never study, but feel every day. We examined how framing shapes meaning, how listening shapes influence, how questions open minds, how tone shifts perception, how body language reveals truth, how stories create emotion, how trust removes resistance, how boundaries preserve respect, how persuasion aligns interests, and how timing carries power. These are not tricks, nor are they gimmicks. They are timeless tools for navigating human behavior. Communication is not merely about expression, it is about connection. Connection to ideas, connection to emotions, connection to other people. When communication lacks connection, it becomes noise. When communication gains connection, it becomes impact. Impact is the difference between being heard and being remembered, between being understood and being followed, between offering advice and inspiring action. Mastering communication is also an act of responsibility. Your words can build someone up or break someone down. Your tone can calm or inflame. Your silence can soothe or intimidate. Your questions can deepen understanding or expose insecurity. In every interaction, you carry influence, even when you don't realize it. To communicate well is to use that influence intentionally instead of accidentally. The great advantage of communication is that it compounds. A single skill applied today makes tomorrow's conversations easier. A boundary set today prevents conflict tomorrow. A listening habit formed now improves relationships for years. A shift in framing makes negotiations smoother and arguments shorter. Communication skills repay effort endlessly. They travel with you wherever you go, into workrooms, living rooms, boardrooms, friendships, partnerships, and moments where your future is shaped by a single sentence. But perhaps the most important truth is this: powerful communication starts inside. If your mind is unclear, your communication becomes chaotic. If your emotions are unregulated, your communication becomes reactive. If your ego is fragile, your communication becomes defensive. If your curiosity is absent, your communication becomes shallow. The stronger and more grounded your internal world becomes, the more effective your external communication becomes. Mastering communication, then, is inseparable from mastering yourself. This audiobook is not the end of the journey. Communication is a lifelong craft. You will refine it every time you ask a better question, listen a little longer, reframe a difficult conversation, express a boundary calmly, adapt your tone, pause strategically, or tell a story that moves someone to act. Growth happens in moments, subtle, small, and continuous. If there is one core message to take with you, it is this: speak smart, not to impress, but to connect. Not to dominate, but to align. Not to overwhelm, but to clarify. Not to control, but to influence. Communication done well does not make you louder, it makes you more effective. Influence does not live in volume, it lives in understanding. Your words will shape the opportunities you receive, the relationships you build, the conflicts you resolve, the leadership you express, and the impact you leave. Every conversation is a chance to practice. Every interaction is a chance to refine. And every day offers moments to communicate with more intention, more presence, and more intelligence. In a world full of noise, the ability to communicate with clarity, calmness, and power is not just an advantage. It is a form of leverage. Use it wisely, use it consistently, and let it elevate the way you think, the way you lead, and the way you connect with others.